I forgave my daughter even when she told everyone I had senile dementia just to steal my inheritance. The first time I heard it, she was not even talking to me. Paige was on speakerphone with her husband, her voice a hush of urgency as she paced grooves into my kitchen rug. "He leaves the stove on, Trent." He repeats himself. "The bank said they need someone in charge." She glanced at me over the rim of my own teacup, the cup Eleanor chose in 1989 at a shop in Victoria, when we were still buying fragile things and promising each other they would last. I stirred honey into the tea Paige had made and pretended not to taste the chalky edge of crushed melatonin. It was a Tuesday, bright and clean. The lemon tree outside the sink window was fat with fruit, and the clock over the pantry clicked the seconds like a metronome teaching a stubborn student. Paige walked past the sunlight on the linoleum and left a set of little scuffed half-moons where her heels pivoted toward me and then away, as if even her shoes could not decide which side to stand on. The phone lay flat on the table, Trent's voice tinny and dampened, like a man speaking through a handkerchief. "If the bank manager is nervous, do it now," he said. "Do not wait for a fall." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. A fall. Interesting word for something they were trying so hard to push me into. I am 74, a grandfather, 2 good knees, 1 stiff shoulder that complains in the rain, and a mind that still does the Sunday crossword in pen. Last week, 19 down was toothsome, and I wrote in sapid before the coffee cooled. I can recite my driver's license number and the birth dates of my grandchildren, and the day Eleanor first wore the red dress that made the clerk at the hardware store drop a box of screws. This is what I know: names, dates, promises. This is what my daughter says I do not. After Eleanor passed, the house grew too quiet in that disrespectful way silence has, like a guest who never asks if he has stayed too long. I let Paige come in and fill it. She organized my mail into pastel folders. She labeled my freezer with neat dates that made me feel like I had already been preserved. She took my passwords, short nonsense words I had kept penciled on a card, and replaced them with little phrases she could remember. Lucy, 123 exclamation mark on the checking account. Safe home now, for the email. She laughed about it. "Old man, I am modernizing you," she said, and kissed my cheek. I pretended not to notice how the logins now came to her phone. At first, I mistook it for care. That is the humiliating part, the part that makes a man go silent in his own head. I let her drive me to church and carry my offering envelope as if it were heavy. I let her rehang my pots at a height she preferred. I let her move Eleanor's recipe box from the second drawer to the first, so we can find it quickly, even though it had been quick enough for 48 years. Little trades, my habits for her comfort, my dignity for her smile. Then the story started. Not to me, never to me. They seated themselves in places that other people would water. A Facebook post with an old photograph of me and Eleanor on the ferry to Swartz Bay, text pasted above it in a tone of tender disaster. Watching Dad fade is the hardest thing. Pray for us as we navigate next steps. Next steps, like we were crossing a creek and needed someone to throw stones into the right places. A whispered call to my cousin May about safety. The word stretched long enough to cover a theft. "He left the keys in the door overnight," Paige said, as if she had not been the one to take them from the hook and leave them there for her photograph. A note slid into the pastor's hand after service, asking if he could gently counsel Dad toward appropriate care before we lose him, as if I had wandered out of the pew and into the woods. People looked at me differently after that, not cruelly, kindly, which was worse. The checker at Jensen's Market offered to walk my groceries out to the car, even though she was still swamped at her station. Mr. Klein at the bank asked if I had given thought to a succession plan. A teenage neighbor I barely know mowed my front strip without asking. left a bill with a smiley face and a discount for seniors circled twice. The town bent soft around me like padding, and I hated the quiet it made. Paige perfected her worried face. She wore clothes and colors that photographs like to forgive. She practiced the tilt of her head in the microwave door. When she spoke on the phone, she used certain phrases, for his own good, before it is too late. We are all just doing our best. That sound like love from a distance and something else up close. She began to help with medication I do not take. Fish oil, calcium, one daily multivitamin that could probably be traded for a bowl of spinach. Yet somehow the little white melatonin tablets migrated from the guest room nightstand to the kitchen. "Dad, you have been so restless," she said, pouring water like a nurse in a commercial, and dropped one in my tea with a flourish, practiced enough to be muscle memory. Melatonin is not a sin, but it makes a man slow. Slow hands fumble with bills at the register. Slow minds pause too long before answering the month. Slowness is a costume that, once draped over you, is hard to shrug off when the room is full of people who wanted to see you in it. I learned to watch the small things. I counted the spoons before bed and in the morning. I memorized the pattern of scratches on my checkbook and noticed when the newest checks were placed at the front, a fast track to a mistake. I kept a pad of paper by the telephone and wrote down every call made from my landline by time and number and name, the way my father balanced his accounts. I kept the door to Eleanor's room, the tool shed she had once declared a room because she hung a paper lantern in it, unlocked when Paige visited. It is hard to lie near a window. Paige's campaign evolved the way weeds do, getting smarter as I tugged at it. She told Trent I had left the burner lit under an empty kettle. I remember that morning exactly. I had turned the knob toward off and felt the click. It was cold when I left the kitchen. I put my palm over it to be sure because old men develop rituals whether we want to or not. Later, I smelled gas. The knob had been nudged on. There is no proof in a smell, only story, and hers was already planted. "Dad, you scared me," she said, and her voice trembled just enough to recruit witnesses from thin air. "That is how houses go up." She took my checkbook for now, waving it like a dangerous toy. "I will pay the utilities, Dad." "You relax." She began forwarding my mail to her post office box and opening it, then bringing me the empty envelopes with neat explanations. Renewals, routine, reminders. She called Mr. Klein again, this time with me in the room, and put him on speaker. "We are moving to a joint account," she said, brisk as weather. "Dad agrees." I said, "We are not," and she placed her hand on my shoulder, a theatrical hush that told him the real story would be told later. When I did not bend, the stories looked for stronger wind. Paige recorded me on her phone during conversations and played back the parts where I paused. "Listen," she told Trent in my hallway. "He trails off. He cannot hold a thought." She drafted an email to my sister. Subject line, "Urgent," explaining how frightened she was to be the only child willing to face reality, and asking if Aunt May would support a meeting with the bank. She printed articles about elder abuse with a yellow highlighter sunburning all the parts that made me look like my own perpetrator. I did something small then, and it mattered. I looked at the teacup again. The tiny nick in the saucer that only I noticed, right where Eleanor set hers down too quickly after the fairy horn startled her. The hairline crack that had never grown. I remembered how Eleanor had laughed and said, "Not everything delicate breaks." I set the cup down and smiled into it. A man can remember what is fragile and still know what will not shatter. The next time Paige accidentally left my front door open and texted the family group chat that she had found me wandering on the porch in slippers at midnight, I checked the timestamp on my doorbell camera and printed the photograph of myself at 9:57 in the evening, fully dressed, locking up. I did not show it to her, not yet. A truth offered too early becomes a prop in the other person's play. The air in the kitchen thinned as she kept talking to Trent. He repeats himself, she said again, and I could hear the rustle of something legal on the other end of the line. The bank said they need someone in charge. She measured me then, the way people measure things they are thinking about selling, eyes sliding over edges, calculating the shine and the scratches. She reached out and adjusted the napkin by my plate, turning it just so, and with her other hand slid a blank piece of paper from her folder and placed a pen on top of it, as if a man might sign anything to make the noise end. I tasted the melatonin and decided to stay awake. I am not a perfect father. There are 20 years of small grievances Paige could stack like kindling if she wanted to make a quick heat. But I am not the man she was describing on her phone. This is how it begins, I thought, not with a collapse, but with a chorus. The first singer starts in your kitchen. Then the neighbors hum along. Then the bank manager joins and the pastor nods the beat. Before you know it, you are the only one in the room who has not learned the tune. At first I mistook it for care. Then the stories started. Facebook posts about my decline, whispered calls to cousins about safety, a note to my pastor asking him to gently counsel Dad toward appropriate care before we lose him. And because I am an old man who still believes in paper and proof, I began to collect my own story, one quiet page at a time, while my daughter rehearsed hers aloud. Forgiveness came easier than acceptance. I told myself that grief makes people foolish, that a daughter can love you and still want what you have. So I forgave her, out loud, more than once. Eleanor used to say, when fog rolled over the strait and swallowed the fairy lights, do not argue with weather. Wait for the shoreline. Forgiveness, I decided, would be my shoreline, not surrender, not silence. A fixed point I could steer by while the shouting dulled to wind. I forgave her when she told my sister I was wandering at night, even though my smartwatch says I sleep like a cat on a sunny windowsill. I remembered nights on the porch with Eleanor, counting the last porch lights winking out on our street and naming the constellations wrong on purpose so we could correct each other. I remembered standing watch outside the nursery door when Paige was an infant, 20 steps back and forth until my footprints wore a faint path into the carpet. I have been the kind of man who listens for the house to breathe since I was 22. If I had wandered, I would have known where I was going. I forgave her when she took my checkbook, for now. My father taught me to balance a ledger at the kitchen table after supper, his thumb smudged with graphite, his voice steady. Every penny has to shake hands with a line, he said, tapping the column. He gave me a worn envelope for receipts and a stub pencil, and told me that money is not love, but it is a promise, and you do not break promises in a family. I thought of that when Paige slid the checkbook into her purse like a magician palming a coin. I let it go that day, but I pressed my palm to the empty drawer and felt the old promise thrum. I forgave her the morning I found a pre-filled power of attorney on my kitchen table with a sticky note. Sign here, Dad. It will make things easier. I remembered another kitchen table, my grandfather's, the summer he pressed a 1922 silver dollar into my hand and said, "A signature is the only thing you have that looks like it is worth nothing." He told me to sign slow and only when the paper did not make my hand feel cold. The form on my table felt like ice. I warmed my fingers around my coffee mug and told Paige I would think about it. And when she left, I slid the coin from the cigar box where I keep it and set it on the paper. Metal against legal language. Weight against hurry. Forgiveness, I learned, is not forgetting. It is the space you clear around yourself so you can remember what matters without shouting. I forgave her because the word opened the room and let me breathe. Because it kept her close enough that I could watch what she did with her hands when she thought no one saw. Because Eleanor's voice in my head was patient, but not naive. But every forgiveness bought me time. Time to steady my grip. Time to sharpen the chisel before any cut. Time to choose the shoreline I would aim for when the fog lifted. I knew that it's time to make my move. I may be forgiving, but I'll do everything to bring justice to the extent that may shock you. The first thing I did with that time was drive myself to the memory clinic. I arrived early because I wanted the receptionist to see me walk in under my own power. The lobby smelled like lemon disinfectant and old magazines. A man my age was arguing gently with a vending machine that would not release his crackers. I pressed the button for him and watched the coil turn like a slow thought finally coming loose. When the nurse called my name, I stood up quickly enough to make my knee complain and did not wince. 6 hours, 3 specialists, and a stack of puzzles that made my fingers itch with the joy of being tested. They asked my consent and filmed everything, me saying my name, the date, the president, me repeating 7 words forward and backward, while a metronome ticked like a smug woodpecker on the wall. I surprised myself by enjoying it. The rhythm of recall felt like sanding a piece of maple until it gleamed. The grain of memory rose under careful pressure. In one room they flashed faces, and I named them as if they were neighbors arriving at my fence. In another they read me a story about a boy and a blue bicycle, and I told it back with the bicycle red on purpose to see if they would correct me. They smiled and said, "Tell it again." And I did, exactly as written, because I have always liked to show that I know the rules before I bend them. There were moments I felt small. A pen rolled off the table and I flinched, hearing Eleanor laugh in the back of my head. "You are allowed to drop things, Tom." There were moments I felt like a boy in school again, hungry to get an answer right for a teacher who would never know how much it mattered. When they asked me to draw a clock, I drew Eleanor's, the one with the thin hands and the hairline crack at 7 that never grew. When they asked for 3 animals, I said robin, fox, and cow, thinking of the place behind my grandfather's barn where all 3 had left tracks after a winter thaw, and I had followed each one for a yard before turning back. When I left, I had a letter in a sealed envelope, notarized and stamped, stating that I had full decisional capacity. The weight of it in my hand felt like a passport back into my own life. I drove home slow, resting my palm on the envelope on the passenger seat as if it could blow away. I opened Eleanor's recipe box, hinge squeaking the same way it had when she was alive, and slid the letter between lemon cake and pot roast. I ran my thumb over her handwriting, the way she looped the Y in mayonnaise as if she were tying a bow. She would have liked the symmetry, a test for a mind tucked next to instructions for feeding a family. Second, I called my old friend Mary Collins, who retired from the bench last year and does not suffer fools. We met at the diner where we had celebrated her swearing in a lifetime ago. She ordered black coffee and told the waitress to keep it coming. "You want punishment or prevention?" she asked, eyes soft and voice hard. "Prevention," I said, and felt my mouth set the way it had the day I taught Paige to ride a bicycle and let go even though every muscle wanted to hold on. Mary introduced me to a lawyer, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a fondness for quiet questions that slid under your guard and came up holding the truth. She did not sell me fear. She drew boxes on a yellow pad and wrote names in them and then crossed out some names and wrote others until the paper looked like a family that had learned better manners. 2 weeks later, my estate did not belong to me in the way Paige thought it did. My house was deeded, upon my death, to the Clear Pines Makers Fund, a small foundation I created for veterans and widows who need a place to work with their hands. The name came to me from the stand of pines behind the workshop that whisper even when there is no wind, and from the day after the funeral when a man from Eleanor's choir came by to plane a warped board and left standing straighter. The rest, savings, bonds, the cabin in Flagstaff, poured into a trust for my granddaughter Lucy. She is 9. She once sewed a crooked pillow for my birthday that still smells like crayons and a little like apples because she stuffed it while eating one, and there is a place in the seam where the thread doubled back on itself as if it wanted to be sure. Signing those papers felt like replacing a rotten joist, necessary, loud, and a little shameful that it had needed doing. I thought of Lucy's small hand in mine at the county fair when she wanted to ride the big wheel, and I said not yet, not until I could see how it was built. I thought of the cabin in Flagstaff where Eleanor and I had once been snowed in for 2 days, and learned the pleasure of slow soup in each other's company, the stove ticking and the world reduced to warm circles of light. I did not think of Paige at first because I wanted the building to be done before I inspected the damage. Then I did think of her. Paige appears nowhere in the trust documents except twice, as explicitly prohibited from serving as trustee, and as the recipient of $1 silver, 1922, the year my father's father was born. I took the coin out the night before I signed and held it in my palm until the metal matched my skin. A signature is the only thing you have that looks like it is worth nothing, my grandfather had said, and I signed slow, each letter like a rung on a ladder I meant to climb back down safely. The will includes a no-contest clause that reads, in the precise language lawyers love, any beneficiary who challenges this instrument shall be deemed to have predeceased me. I asked for that line to be printed in 14-point font. I wanted it to be easy to read even through tears, even on a bad day, even by someone who prefers stories to statements. Third, I bought a small camera that looks like a salt shaker and placed it beside the kitchen sink, facing the table where Paige prefers to set down documents that just need a quick signature. I stood in the electronics aisle, longer than any man needs to stand, listening to the little box in my hand argue with me about whether I was betraying my child. I thought of the night I found Paige, 17 and furious, on the back steps with a suitcase. I had sat beside her without speaking until the anger rattled out of her like a stone in a glass jar. Tell the truth, I had said finally. To yourself first. The camera was not a trap. It was a way to remember what had happened when the room got hot. I felt like a thief unboxing it, but the guilt drained away when I saw how the lens simply watched and did not judge. I set it at the angle I use when I am sketching birdhouses, the one that lets me see both hands and the grain. And because I have learned that people often confess to screens more freely than to faces, I started a video journal on my old desktop. Every Friday I sat down and spoke to the little green light. I said the date, slowly enough for anyone to follow my mouth. I said what I had done that week. Sanded cedar, fixed the gate latch, read Lucy chapter 5 of the book with the horse that will not be tamed. I said that if anyone was watching, I wanted them to know that I remembered Eleanor's laugh, how it startled from her like a flock of birds, and Lucy's birthday, October 12th, cake shaped like a star, and the name of every street in my childhood neighborhood, each one a bead on a string I can still finger in the dark. On one of those Fridays, as I was saying the names of the men from my old shop class just to prove I could, the doorbell rang. The green light stayed on. I left the camera humming gently and went to answer the door. Paige stood on the porch with the leather folder and a smile that was built to be believed. She had on a soft gray sweater, the kind that looks like it apologizes in advance. The smell of some new shampoo came with her, lavender meant to calm or to cover. I stepped back and let her in. The green light on my desktop winked to itself in the next room. The salt shaker by the sink stared at the kitchen table the way a dog waits for the word. "Busy day?" she asked, crossing to the table without waiting for an answer. She always sits where Eleanor used to sit, as if where can be inherited. "I have been talking to myself," I said, nodding toward the office. "Practice for later." She did a quick scan. Countertops, stove, lock on the back door, and then set her folder down. Papers squared, pen aligned. She was efficient when she was nervous. That used to make me proud. "Tea?" I asked. "Please." Her voice softened. "I brought your vitamins." She tapped her purse, her tell, and glanced, unthinking, toward the mug she prefers for me, the one with the thick lip that hides a taste. I turned on the kettle and felt the little camera watching a triangle of the room. Sink, table, my hands. I could feel my grandfather's dollar in my pocket like a coin cooled in a winter palm. I thought of Eleanor's line, "Tell the truth to yourself first," and decided I would lie just enough to catch a bigger one. "How did it go at the bank?" I asked, keeping my back to her so she could relax her face. They are concerned, she said, shaping the word the way people shape a complaint to sound like concern. Mr. Klein says the accounts could be frozen if there is a question of capacity. We do not want that. For Lucy's sake, she added the last like a garnish. What would the bank need? I stirred honey into my cup and kept the spoon moving so she would reach for her stash. A signature? Someone in charge? Yes. Paper slid from the folder. A durable power of attorney, temporary, for now. She leaned past me, dropped 2 small white moons into my tea, and stirred, once, twice, the way someone presses a bruise to see if it still hurts. You have been so restless, Dad. This will help you focus. I set the cup down untouched and turned, making myself move a little slowly, as if a thought had almost escaped. I have never been a good actor, but age gives every man a costume. Temporary, I said. And after temporary? It can convert, she said lightly, if needed. We do not want to get to guardianship, but if the court thinks, if you leave the stove on, if you drive somewhere and forget why, like the post office, I said, or the hardware store. Not places I forget, places she had already placed in her stories. Exactly. Face as flat as a plate. I sat. The chair creaked the way it had since Eleanor's brother leaned back too far at Thanksgiving in 1992. Remind me, I said, head cocked like a man trying to hear his own thoughts over a metronome. Power of attorney is different from a will. Totally different, she said, relieved to have something to explain. Paige has always loved the feeling of being the only one in the room who knows. This just lets me sign for you, pay your bills, protect your assets. Keep you safe. She slid the pen closer, a bright silver thing that reflected the ceiling light like a little sun. The will is separate. We can do that after, I repeated. I let the words sit between us like a coin we both wanted to pick up. She opened the leather folder wider, and I saw a familiar font, a downloaded elder law packet, and a stack of tabs like a row of little tongues. Behind it, another document flashed a title before she covered it with her hand. Last Will and Testament of Thomas Bell. Not my new one. The old template she had bullied me into printing out a year ago and that I had pretended to consider before it found the bottom of a drawer. What would you sign for me? I asked. Mild, curious. Just the small things? Bills, she said promptly. Insurance. We would move your accounts to a safer bank with less online exposure. Maybe list the cabin. List, I said, like I was testing how the word fit in my mouth. Sell the cabin. If it is best, she said, eyes fixed on the forms. The stairs are not safe for you. They have not changed, I said. But I suppose I have. She did not look up. It is also time we updated your will. The old one leaves everything to me. It is simplest that way. And then Lucy is provided for through me. Judges prefer that. Keeps it in the family. What about the trust? I asked, making my voice too casual. The one for Lucy. I watched a pulse flutter in her neck, quick as a fish turning under light. She wet her lips. Those take a while to file, Dad. There is a window before anything is recorded. If we update the will now, it clarifies intent. No confusion. Before Lucy's trust is final, I said, as if remembering a phrase I had heard in a dream. Yes, she said, eager. Exactly. I nodded, as if the idea had brushed me kindly on the shoulder. This would make things easier, I said, glancing at the sticky note she had prepared in her head. For Trent, too. For all of us, she said. Trent is just trying to help with what the bank needs. The phone on the table buzzed, Trent's name lighting the screen. She flipped it over so the camera would catch the sound but not the face. I took up the pen and tapped it against the edge of the document the way my father used to tap a pipe he was not allowed to smoke in the house. Paige's eyes followed the pen the way a cat tracks a string. "I am always worried about my signature," I said. "It has gotten messy. Will it still count if it looks tired?" "Oh, Dad," she said, and her voice cupped me like a hand. "It is fine." "No one analyzes these things." "Maybe show me," I said. I made my fingers clumsy. "How to make it look like mine? I know you have seen it enough." She laughed, small and sharp. "Do not be silly." But her hand moved on its own, pulling the magazine from the fruit bowl, June's issue with a trout on the cover, and sliding it under her palm. "Print your name for me," she said, laying a scrap of paper over the glossy page. "So your hand warms up." Then, quick as a pickpocket, she drew a version of my signature in the corner of the magazine where it would not be obvious unless you were looking for what people are not supposed to do. I looked down at the salt shaker. The camera could see the magazine. I could not hear it, but in my head there was a click, like a puzzle piece seating. She pushed the pen back across the table and set the power of attorney in front of me, covering the will with her forearm the way a schoolgirl covers answers on a test. "Sign here," she said, tapping the yellow flag. "And here." The bank said today is best. "Do they?" I asked. I lifted the tea and brought it to my mouth, letting the steam fog my glasses for a second so I could blink and look old. I sipped, then set it down. I would not give her the satisfaction of watching me swallow. "I have been so restless," I said, letting the sentence drift like a leaf on a slow river. "How many of those little sleep pills should I take before we go to the bank?" "Just one," she said without a beat. "Two if you are really wired. We need you calm. The manager gets anxious when it looks like they will argue." She smiled. "All sugar. You will not argue, right? This is for your safety." "Safety," I said. "People like to give that as a reason." She bit the inside of her cheek. A habit from childhood, revived. "Dad, please do not make this harder than it is." "The court can do emergency guardianship if you will not cooperate." "Monday. Trent already has the forms. We will bring affidavits. Mrs. Larkin from next door said she saw you looking for your car on foot. The pharmacist wrote a note about your confusion with your medications." "Mrs. Larkin cannot see past her own hibiscus," I said, a little bone of truth thrown into the bowl to make the stew smell right. "And my medications are fish oil and stubbornness." She sighed. "It is not about you. It is about Lucy. Private school is expensive. If accounts freeze, if the cabin sits, if we cannot get to the bonds, then Trent's business line gets called," I said, almost gently, "and the new car gets returned. And the mower you did not need goes back to the store." I smiled, and it was not kind. The air thinned. I could feel the camera watching the stillness. Paige glanced at the desktop office, noticed the green glow for the first time, and then dismissed it as an old man's screensaver. She leaned in, almost pleading. "Dad, sign. We will update the will next. We can do the old one so there are no questions. Before the trust creates confusion. You know what happens if people fight in probate." "I do," I said. I thought of rooms with air like hospitals and of judges whose eyes go flat when they are tired of lies. I slid the paper back toward her, just the width of my thumb. "Tell me the plan again," I said softly. "So I am sure. I am slow these days. Help me keep up." She took the bait because she wanted to hear herself say it more than she wanted me to hear it. "I get power of attorney. We move your accounts to my bank. We sell the cabin. We set up auto pay for your facility when we find a good one. We redo the will. Do not worry about the language. I have a template, so everything is clean. We do it this weekend, before Lucy's trust is final." "Clean," I repeated. I turned my pen in my fingers so the light flashed off the clip and into the tiny eye of the salt shaker. "But I do not like moving," I said, injecting a thin thread of panic into my voice. "Moving me to a facility. Can we wait on that until after the judge says I have lost my mind?" She flinched. No one likes to hear the knife named. It is not about losing, she said. It is about help. Help, I said. Vitamins in my tea. Her eyes hardened. Do not be dramatic. I let my hand tremble just once and she softened in reflex. Dad, please, she whispered. Sign. This will make things easier. I looked at the pen. I looked at her. I looked deliberately at the little silver lens by the sink. Then I set the pen down and folded my hands like a man about to say grace. I forgive you, I said. Her head jerked, confusion scrubbing the certainty from her face. For what? For being afraid, I said. For wanting safety more than honesty. I let the words fall out one by one, the way a mechanic lays parts on a towel so he can prove he did not lose any. For thinking I would not notice you practicing my name. She covered the corner of the magazine with her palm, too late. Dad, she said, and the helplessness in it was almost real. I will not sign today, I said, gentle as a man telling a child it is time to come in from rain. But thank you for explaining everything so clearly. Her eyes went to the folder, to the pen, to the salt shaker she did not know was watching. Something in her recalculated. She gathered the pages, quick motions, no more theater, and slid them back into the leather like knives into sleeves. Then Monday, she said. We will let the court decide. Monday, I said, standing so she could see how steady I was when I wanted to be. Tell Trent to bring his good tie. She left without finishing her tea. When the door closed, the house exhaled. I walked to the office and sat down in front of the green light. The recording clocked on silently. I said the date. I named the weather. Then I said, she wants emergency guardianship on Monday. And I repeated it, slow and exact, so there would be no confusion later about what had been promised in my own kitchen. Over the weekend, the house held its breath. I copied the clinic letter 3 times, slid one into my jacket, one into the glove box, one beneath Eleanor's lemon cake recipe. I backed up the salt shaker video to 2 thumb drives and labeled them in block letters a tired man could read. Mary's young lawyer, Harper, filed our response and told me to rest. I sanded a cedar plank instead, long passes until the grain came up like truth does when you are patient. On Sunday night I laid out my suit, pressed the knees, and set my grandfather's $1922 on top of the tie. It looked like a small moon blessing the tide. Monday morning, the courthouse smelled like paper and anxiety. I watched sunlight climb the flag in the lobby and counted the staples in the corner of our motion. I had not been in a courtroom since Eleanor fought the city over a disputed property line and won with a hand-drawn map. Back then, I learned that the person who arrives calm tends to be believed. I touched the coin in my pocket and told my heart to be ordinary. Paige came dressed in gray and carrying a box of tissues she did not need. Trent sat behind her, handsome and restless, eyes flicking to the exit like a man measuring the distance to a better story. She did not look at me. She arranged her papers and turned her worried face toward the bench. The judge was younger than I expected, older than she looked. She read for a long minute, the kind of silence that makes liars itch. "Counsel," she said, "I have a petition for emergency guardianship and an objection with exhibits." "Ms. Bell, you may proceed," Paige's lawyer started slow and soft. "All about safety and capacity." Affidavits were filed. Mrs. Larkin saw me searching for my car on foot. A part-time pharmacist wrote that I was confused by my medications. Mr. Klein was concerned about my accounts. They said words like decline and risk the way a person repeats a spell to keep the dark out. I watched the second hand on the courtroom clock, steady as a carpenter's square. Harper stood. "We will be brief," she said, and I liked her for it. She handed the bailiff a sealed envelope. Neuropsychological evaluation, notarized, dated 30 days ago. Finding, full decisional capacity. The judge slit the top with a little knife and read. Her eyebrows climbed half a confession. "Next," Harper said, and the monitor lit. My kitchen appeared, bright as the morning it had been filmed. Paige came into frame, alone. She opened her folder, practiced my signature on the corner of a magazine, and tipped 2 white tablets into my tea with the ease of habit. Then she said the line I had rehearsed in my head until it lost its sting. Before Lucy's trust is final. In the gallery, someone exhaled through their teeth. Trent's Adam's apple bobbed and forgot to come back down. Paige reached for the tissues, but her hands did not shake. "He asked me to help," she murmured. "He is confused. He needed to calm down." Harper tilted her head. "And the practice signature?" "My father's hand is—" "Still his," I said, standing without being asked. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge nodded. I kept my hands on the rail where everyone could see they were steady. "Forgiveness," I said, "is something I can give. My name is not." I looked at Paige then, not to punish her, but to end something. "You are my daughter. I forgive you for being afraid. I will not give you my life to make yours easier." Harper called witnesses. Mr. Klein walked us through his concern, which turned out to be a series of phone calls from Paige, not me. My pharmacist, explained that I take fish oil and stubbornness. The part-timer with the note had never filled a single prescription for me. Mrs. Larkin admitted, under questioning, that her hibiscus hedge has not allowed her to see my driveway since June. Harper handed up a still from my doorbell camera, me locking up at 9:57 p.m. on the night Paige claimed I was wandering, and let the timestamp do the talking. Then came the documents. Harper slid the recorded deed for my house to the Clear Pines Makers Fund across the evidence table, the stamp dark and satisfying. She laid the trust for Lucy beside it, the clause prohibiting Paige as trustee in letters so large they might be read from the cheap seats. She added my video journal entries log, dates, topics, and a description of Eleanor's laugh that matched the one Aunt May remembered under oath. When Harper finished, the courtroom felt like the air after thunder. Charged, cleaner. "Ms. Bell," the judge said, turning her attention to my daughter, "do you wish to amend your petition?" Paige's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time that day, she looked like someone who had walked herself into a room and could not find the door out. "I was trying to protect him," she said, and in that moment I believe she had convinced herself. "He repeats himself. He forgets." The judge picked up her pen. "Here is what I forget," she said, tapping the neuropsych report. "I forget why this court should entertain an emergency guardianship for a man with full decisional capacity, whose assets are lawfully settled, and who appears to have been the target of attempted financial exploitation." The gavel did not need to fall. Her voice was enough. "Petition dismissed with prejudice. This matter is referred to Adult Protective Services for investigation. A temporary protective order shall issue limiting Ms. Bell's access to Mr. Bell's residence and accounts, pending that investigation. Fees and costs to respondent. Counsel, prepare the order." Trent stood as if to argue and sat again when Harper merely looked at him. Paige did not move. She had the tissues in her hands now and no use for them. I touched the coin in my pocket, feeling its old face warm. I wanted to be magnanimous and also to finish the job I had come to do. "Your Honor," I said, "one more thing." I held up a single page, my will's no contest clause, enlarged as if for a bad eye. "For the sake of clarity, this is my intent. I ask that it be entered into the record." The judge read it, and her mouth made the shape of a hard, approving line. "Entered," she said. When we filed out, the hallway felt cooler. Mary waited on the bench, hands folded, eyes telling me what she would not say in front of anyone else. I walked past Paige. She looked up. I nodded once. Forgiveness is the door I walked through. The hammer belonged to the truth, and it had found its mark. I did my revenge, but that's not the end. She still needed to demonstrate me that my forgiveness mattered. After court, the house did not celebrate. It settled. I took the batteries out of the salt shaker camera and slid it into a drawer with the warranty papers and the rubber bands that have outlived 3 newspapers. I kept the video journal going. I spoke the date, the weather, what I cooked, who came by. I said, without saying her name, that love can survive without being allowed to rule. Adult Protective Services called twice, polite as doctors, then sent a letter that used the phrase, substantiated attempt. I did not frame it. I put it with the clinic report and Eleanor's lemon cake. Clear Pines filled. Veterans, widows, a few young men who had lost their fathers too early and their tempers too quickly. On Wednesdays, we made dovetail joints that refused to pretend they fit unless they really did. On Saturdays, Lucy painted everything that did not move. She is taller now, and the pillow she made me is coming apart at the corner where her double knot loosened. I will not fix it. It is a good reminder of what effort looks like from the inside. Paige stood at the gate in October, then again in December. The protective order kept her at the sidewalk and me on the gravel, and we learned to talk across the space without raising our voices. She wanted to skip to the end. I would not. I named the path. 2 years of work in elder care, with proof. Therapy, not as a performance, but as a practice. A public apology that names the acts, not the feelings. Tell the truth in full sentences, with no ifs or maybes. Put Lucy first in deeds. I told her that forgiveness was mine to give, but trust would be measured, not announced. She nodded like a person accepts a sentence. She began. On Tuesday and Thursday nights she served supper at the county memory wing, tray by tray, and wiped up spills she did not cause. In group therapy she learned to call what she did exploitation without a paragraph wrapped around it. In church after Sunday service she stood beside the piano and said her piece. She said, "I told people my father was senile. I added pills to his tea. I practiced his signature. I wanted control. I was wrong." The room shifted. No one clapped. It was better than clapping. I kept boundaries as if they were ladders in a storm. Checklists, logs, time limits, doors that stayed locked or opened only when someone else was present. During the first winter, Paige came by once a week to sweep the workshop and stack lumber. She never made tea. I never asked. We stood near each other without standing together and passed sandpaper back and forth like a currency. Lucy watched all of it, and it taught her more about apologies than anything I could have said. The investigation ended without charges because I asked for that. I wanted a consequence that produced work, not a story. The court's order lapsed, and we kept most of it anyway. Paige started bringing the sign-in sheets from the memory wing, corners bent, names blurred by disinfectant. She did not point to them. She just set them on the table and went to fetch the broom. In spring, she took a class in safe food handling so she could help on Saturdays at Clear Pines without anyone fussing. At 14 months, we ate on the porch together for the first time. Lucy, Paige, and me. I poured my own tea. Paige did not touch the cups. She told me small things about her days, not the kind of facts you use as alibis, but the kind that make up a person. The dog down the street had puppies. Her basil died and she replanted. She forgot a password and had to call for help. When she laughed, it did not ask me for anything. At 18 months, she brought a folded note. It was not addressed to me. It was for Lucy. It said, "When you are older and want to know, ask me. I will not clean it up to make myself look better. I will tell you what I did and what Grandpa did and why the rules in our house look the way they do." She left it with me. I read it and put it in the recipe box beside pot roast. Some truths deserve to be kept where people go looking for how to feed each other. 2 years came around like a tide that had been moving the whole time. We met at the workshop when the pines were loud with wind. I had Harper there and Mary on the bench by the door because habit is a safer thing than hope. I told Paige what would change and what would not. The trust for Lucy stays as written. Paige is not trustee, she will not be. But the Clear Pines Board approved a small stipend for the household as long as Lucy lives there and stays in school. It goes straight to the school and the landlord. No hands pass over it, which means there is nothing to grab. I gave Paige a key, not to the house, to the workshop gate. Her hand trembled, and she tucked it away like a seed you refuse to show anyone until it sprouts. You will have a shift on Wednesdays, I said. Set up, sweep, lock up. If you miss without reason, the key comes back. She nodded. And your apology, I said. Not the church one, the one to me. You have it? She took a page from her pocket and read it. All of it, without a single word that tried to slide out of blame and into weather. When she was done, I forgave her again. It landed differently. Less like mercy. More like a contract both of us had signed. Now, at the end of the week, I sit at the desk with the little green light and make my last entry for a while. I say the date. I say what I cooked, lemon chicken, and that Lucy stole the crispiest piece and that it made me proud. I say Eleanor's name aloud so the house remembers. And I say this, forgiveness is not an event. It is a task that repeats, like sanding, like sweeping, like filling the bird feeder before the storm. I give it, and I do not give away the rest with it. I keep my will. I keep my mind. I keep my door. I keep my daughter at the gate, and some days I open it, and some days I do not, and both are love.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.